In Europe was a black man by the name of Angelo Solomon. He was a guy, he was a Moor, he was a celebrity in Europe, in Austria. He was also known as the father of pure Masonic thought because he was a Mason as well. And this guy, when he died, they literally stuffed his body. They skinned him and stuffed his body, and they would have him on display at certain places. So he was a very important figure in Europe.
Suleiman taught Mozart. Who's Suleiman? Suleiman's a Moor. He's an African. Who's Beethoven? Beethoven was Thoven Bey. He was a Moor.
His mother was a Moor. Yes. And when he went deaf, that melanin kicked in. The inner eye kicked in. He heard music better when he was deaf than he heard it otherwise. There's also another myth that he cut the webbing of his hand down to the bone so that he can get a better stretch. So there's some of the 32nd chords that he has, he plays, and most people can't play. They need like two people playing. That's why some people, in certain instances, you see two people playing Beethoven, two pianos playing Beethoven. That's because of what he did when he stretched his finger.
Beethoven was called a Moor when he was growing up. Beethoven, there's a book about him called Beethoven's Hair because people were so infatuated with the texture of his hair. So that African bloodline runs real deep throughout Europe. And again, he was called a Moor, and the Moors were very important throughout Europe. And it's funny, the importance of the Moor was so deep in Europe, but we rarely hear about them in history books today. Reference to Moors over here in American history. The Moors were African men who went into Europe around 711 AD, and they really civilized Europe because Europe was going through a dark age. Europe was really struggling because after the Vandals had basically destroyed Rome, everything was backwards over there. So the Moors went in and they ushered in the Renaissance era. They brought in science, mathematics, astrology. They brought all of this into Europe.
They are bringing in hot and cold running water. They are bringing in concepts of what we call a cosmopolitan city. They are lighting the streets by lamps. In Cordova, you know, they built an entire city where the streets for miles you could walk with lamps that lit the street at night. And they had raised sidewalks where people could walk. The kings and queens of Europe lived in barns. Nobody wants to admit that. But they lived in barns. They lived with the animals. And another thing that the Africans brought in was that they said, you know, you cannot let your chicken run around in your house, and then cows got to go outside. So they created what's called corrals. And corral is an Ethiopian word. It's the K-R-A-L sound. Corral, which is where they would put their animals after they domesticated them. Europeans let them animals run all up and down. This is where the German measles come from. This is where chickenpox come from. Because Europeans did not have a place for their animals. They just ran all up inside their places. And they would carry, as they would get illnesses and sicknesses, they did not bathe, so therefore they had no soap, they had no disinfectant, didn't have alcohol, so that this type of style of living brought illness. When the Moors came in, they wrapped all that up, along with bringing medicine. What you have happening is that these Gothic kingdoms are going to bring down, they're going to sack the Roman Empire. And after they sack the Roman Empire, they're going to take this area over for a while. And then the Moors are going to come in and they're going to push those Visigoths out. And they're going to push them more north, and they're going to chase them out of the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula. And that's where the Moors are going to inhabit from 710 until 1492, January 2nd to be exact, when the last great king, Boabdil, was chased out of Granada.
The term Moor started to